Hello, Brit Lit scholars. Welcome to the sixth week of the fall 2016 semester. Um, so we finished up Romanticism last week, and you should have taken the exam by now. Yesterday, at about time the Falcons kicked off their football game, I saw that about half the class had taken it. If you did not, it did expire last night, so I hope that you did get a chance to get that exam done, because that is worth a significant portion of your grade. I did grade all the postings up through the Mary Wollstonecraft and the Blake and Keats postings that I had up until, like I said, about the same time yesterday. So I was pleased with the Wollstonecraft postings. I gave out a lot of 9s and 10s on the Wollstonecraft posting. I was actually thrilled. Something happened between the time you submitted your Wollstonecraft postings and the time some of you submitted your poetry postings. The quality dropped like a brick. It was unbelievable. I was so happy that I was going to brag on you on this video. Then I read those poetry postings, and there were far too many 6s and 7s in that one. I really was not as pleased. I don't know what happened. Maybe you struggled to understand the questions, or perhaps you struggled to understand the poetry. Whatever it was, the postings weren't quite as good. So let's strive for more of those 9s and 10s and fewer of the smaller grades. And read my comments carefully, because about another week or two, I'm going to stop making comments at all. I'm just going to start throwing numbers on those postings, because I'll be grading much more complex assignments in my 1101 and 1102 classes. So I won't have as much time to comment on those. All right. We start Victorianism this week, which means we start the new textbook, which is the Volume E. Victorianism, basically, go into that slideshow and look at the introduction to Victorianism. It's about during the time of Queen Victoria. She, up until about, I want to say a year ago or so, this month I think it was, a year ago this month, was the longest reigning monarch ever in England's history. Queen Elizabeth II just passed her. And so, up until about a year ago, Queen Victoria could claim that. During Queen Victoria's reign, England changed a lot. This was during the Industrial Revolution, so England went from more of an agricultural country to a more industrial country. England went from barely having any holdings around the world all the way up to having land on about 1/4 of all the land in the world. And when we get to imperialism, you'll see what I mean. And of course, it's hard to pin down what Victorian literature is, because it changed so much from the time of about the 1830s on into the early 1900s and on into the reign of her son, George the IV. So, take a look at that, and then look at the Tennyson selections. I did not ask you to read "Charge of the Light Brigade," which is one of his more well-known poems, and I did not ask you to read "In Memoriam," because even though it is probably his best-known poem, it is a super, super long poem. In fact, it's so long that the textbook actually leaves entire cantos of it out. But it's important that we start with Tennyson, because he probably represents Victorian poetry more than any other single poet. He was born in 1809. He came of age about time Queen Victoria was assuming the throne. He lived to be a ripe old age, and after William Wordsworth was no longer poet laureate, Alfred Lord Tennyson took that spot, and he was poet laureate for many, many years, which was a much bigger deal back then than it is today, of course, but he was really a very, very important figure. What I want you to look at on these two readings that we've got, and your posting questions reflect this, Tennyson drew from popular literature, and literature that we would all know. So for Lady of Shalott, he draws from the Arthurian legend, whereas in Ulysses, he's actually drawing from Homer's Odyssey. And really, the Ulysses poem is actually a sequel to the Odyssey. It's actually a much older Ulysses who has gotten back home and realizes it's just not the same place anymore, and he's too restless of a spirit. He must go out and die in some adventure rather than staying home and basically being a judge, which is, you'll see what I mean whenever you read it. So those are the things to look at, is how Tennyson does some revisionist Arthurian legend and some revisionist Ulysses legend in order to have a new and fresh take on the actual stories. So, with that in mind, I hope that if you have any questions, you'll feel free to contact me through email, through phone call, or if you happen to be in Albany, by dropping by my office and asking me your questions. I think you're going to enjoy Tennyson. I really like these readings. I think that they are very, very good, and I think that they add to the legend of both of the stories which he is adding to the legend of. And that's a hard thing to pull off for an author, but I think Tennyson does it very well. And on that note, happy reading.